What is going on, you guys, and welcome to another DIY video. And today is going to be a really fun one because we are going to be installing the Akebono brakes on my base model 370Z. For those of you who are familiar with the 370Z platform, the base model comes with some slightly smaller brakes. Don't really fill up the 19-inch wheels that I have very well. Plus, I want some more responsiveness out of my brake system. So I am getting the OEM sports brakes. I managed to pick these up used from a guy for a very good price. So we are going to go ahead and fit these on the car today. I've got a little bit of brake fluid here that I've gone ahead and picked up as well. Don't need to do a full brake flush, but we're going to need some of this to be able to top it off as we're doing the work. Alright, so I am only taking the one wheel off for now because we still need to check to see if these brakes are even going to fit inside the wheel, which it does look like it will. I'm kind of roughly matching up where the brake caliper should go, and it does look like we have maybe about half an inch to an inch of clearance. It does get pretty tight. It is important to verify that your wheels will actually clear the rotors and calipers. The OEM 18-inch wheels from Nissan that comes on the newer 370Zs supposedly do clear the brakes. But really, if you want to play it safe, you should go for a 19-inch wheel. This will promise that you'll actually be able to fit the brakes properly. So, we are going to wait for my original brakes to cool down a little bit here because they are still a little bit hot. I just pulled into the garage. I do have some EBC slotted rotors and pads here that I originally installed last year. These are now for sale. If anybody is interested in picking these up, let me know. I am also, of course, taking out the calipers, so if you are looking for a replacement caliper, leave a comment down below, or you can message me on Instagram as well. But we'll go ahead and let the caliper cool down for a little bit, and then we'll continue the install. Alright, so the caliper has had a chance to cool down a little bit here. It's not quite cool enough to be able to touch it with my bare hands, so I'll just wear some gloves so we can handle it. I have turned the steering wheel completely to the right, so that way we can get better access to the bolts holding on the caliper back here. So you can kind of see one of them hanging out up here, and there's another one down there. We're going to undo those here in a second. First thing though, so I have a stainless steel brake line, which y'all can see there. It's not quite the factory one, but I'm going to go ahead and undo this bolt that holds on the stainless steel line, as well as cut off these zip ties here. That way I've got some more play in the brake line. And then when I go to remove the caliper, by undoing those two bolts, I should be able to set it on top of my transmission jack here. We don't want to undo the brake line just yet. We're going to want to minimize the amount of brake fluid that we end up losing. So I'm just going to set it over temporarily while we work on pulling the rotor off, and then we are going to have to make some modifications to the dust shield just to get it out of the way for the new rotors. If you're upgrading to the Akebono brakes, some stainless steel lines would help complement the new brake feel by firming up the pedal a little bit. I've actually done a video detailing the advantages of stainless steel lines. In case you have any doubts or questions, you can go and check that out. Installation is fairly easy, and it uses the factory locations from the base model. I've actually done a video detailing the installation as well. It's a pretty cost-effective way to help increase the pedal feel. It runs you about $100 for these lines or so, and it helps prevent you from having to get the Akebono brackets that fit on the back of the caliper so you can install the OEM lines. It's just all around a great upgrade, and I'd highly recommend it if you're doing the upgrade to the sports brakes. To give you guys a better view of those two bolts now that we're going to take off of the caliper, you can see one of them is right here, and then the other one's located kind of further to the bottom. So we're going to take both of those off. Those hold the caliper onto the actual suspension member here. You'll pull it off, and you'll want to set it down on top of something. I have a transmission jack, but you can use any old floor jack or a box or whatever. We'll just leave it over there temporarily while we do some more work on the car. The socket that you'll need, I'm using a 7/8 inch. The actual socket is a metric one of some sort, but I don't actually have all the metric ones, so I'm just using a 7/8 inch. It's close enough, so it'll get the job done. So we'll go ahead and undo those bolts, and then we'll pull the caliper off. Alright, now at this point you're going to have two options. You can either look into cutting the top lip of the dust shield off, and I've already started doing that. I've got a large set of tin snips here, which is making quick work of just that upper part. I'm trying to leave as much of it intact as possible. I still want to, for the most part, keep it here, but you just need to get this upper lip off because your new rotors are not going to fit underneath that. So you can either cut that off, or if you order a kit from Z1, or you can just go as well to Nissan and you can order a new dust shield that'll fit the rotors. You can install a new one if you'd like. It just means you have to take the hub off and then place your new one in here behind the hub. So I don't really care to do all that. I'm just going to snip the top lip off of this one. So yeah, we'll go ahead and take that off, and then we should be able to fit the new rotors and calipers. If you do plan to cut your dust shield, just be very careful because you will create a bunch of sharp edges and you really don't want to cut yourself on this. Also, make sure you're using a really sharp pair of tin snips. You shouldn't have to use a whole ton of force and risk bending the dust shield, so you want to make sure you got the right tool for the job. Alright, so now we have the upper lip cut off, and you will want to be careful because it is going to leave some sharp edges here. So just be careful when you're putting the new rotor and everything on. Just to kind of give you guys an idea though of what sort of improvement or what sort of size difference we're looking at with these rotors. You can see that pretty much on all sides, the new rotor that we're getting ready to put on is about 1/2 inch wider in diameter than this older one. So we're going to go ahead and get this rotor placed on the car. We're going to check to make sure that there is enough space in between the dust shield. Now that we've got it all cut up, we want to make sure that this thing isn't bent so it's not bumping up against the rotor. So we'll go ahead and test fit it. And with the new rotor test fitted on here, again, just double check, make sure that you have plenty of clearance here between the rotor and the dust shield so that those don't end up bumping into each other. Check your lower one as well. It looks like we are clear. So the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and take the new caliper. We'll get it mounted by reinstalling those 2 bolts on the top and bottom here, and then we'll look at switching out the brake line. And by the way, just kind of show you guys how you know which side each caliper goes on. The painted sign with the Nissan logo should of course be facing outward. These are going to be placed in the factory location on the right side of the rotor, so that's the direction that they need to face. And then the actual location of these bleeder nipples here, which you have one on either side, those need to be at the top of the caliper. The reason for that is it kind of helps bleed the calipers a little bit easier, because when you have the actual hose kind of attached on here, it means that the air can escape upward. So it kind of just helps you bleed them a little bit better and get all the air out of the calipers. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Don't put the wrong caliper on the wrong side of the car. So anyways, we'll go ahead and get this mounted up onto the car now. Alright, and the new rotor and caliper are now on the car. Before we go to actually reattach the brake line to the new caliper though, we'll probably want to go ahead and just test fit the wheels on there. Make sure this thing actually does fit before you go any further. I highly recommend doing that. You don't want to waste your time getting everything put together on the car just to find out that your wheels aren't going to fit. So yeah, we'll go ahead and throw this on and make sure that it actually fits properly. But it is looking much nicer than the old OEM calipers, so I'm really loving the look so far. Alright, and we can see that it looks like we have plenty of clearance here. The wheels are not actually getting all that close to the caliper. There's tons of clearance both on the edge of it as well as between each of the spokes. So I'm not worried about it rubbing on anything. We should be good to go here. So we'll go ahead and pull the wheel back off, get the brake line attached, and we'll go ahead and repeat the same process with the other side of the car. So slight change of pace here. The banjo bolts that come on the factory calipers, which I had used when I was originally installing my stainless steel brake lines, these are too long, so I'm having to revert back to the original banjo bolts that came with the stainless steel lines. These are a little bit shorter and will actually fit to the caliper properly. Only problem is I only have 3 of these, and a total of 4 are needed to be able to do each of the calipers, so I'm going to have to order a second set of these, hopefully from Z1 or somewhere else. So until then, I guess we'll just do the fronts for tonight, and then I'll catch up with you guys in a couple more days, and we can go ahead and do the rears. So just to recap, the OEM base model brake lines, and namely the banjo bolt, are not adaptable to the Akebonos, so you will have to make sure you change out the brake line portion. You can either get the OEM brake lines for the Akebono kit, Z1 sells this as an additional option to the calipers, or you can also just buy their stainless steel lines. The stainless steel upgrade package that Z1 sells does come with a banjo bolt that fits for both models. So again, another reason why upgrading to stainless steel lines might be beneficial here. I didn't want to undo all of the work upgrading the front passenger side, so I went ahead and finished the front driver side as well. It's okay to upgrade just the fronts or just the backs. This just basically means that you're biasing the braking system.
so the fronts or rears will lock up a lot sooner. It does harm your braking distance a little bit, but it's okay to do temporarily, as long as you do both the front and right side. If you just upgrade one wheel, it's bad because when you hit the brakes, you'll end up pulling the one side or the other because that side will have more braking force, so just keep that in mind. Make sure you're upgrading both sides at the same time. I do want to apologize for not covering the installation of the brake pads and the caliper. If you buy them brand new, you will have to install your pads yourself. Because I bought mine used off of another vehicle, the pads were already there, and I didn't want to take the calipers apart to show you guys the pads because it was really hot outside. I was just trying to get it done quickly. So instead, I'm going to leave a link on the screen now to a video that I think covers this topic really well. I'll also be upgrading my pads here in the next couple of weeks, and I'll be doing a video on that as well, and I'll update the link to that video when I complete it. You may have noticed that these brake discs do look pretty badly beat up. These are of course used, and I bought them off of a junk car. It doesn't look like the previous owner had maintained them properly because there's a score going all the way around the circumference of the rotor from, I'm guessing, where a screech tab on a previous pad was. And there's also a bunch of hot spots on it as well. This isn't a rotor and pad setup that I would want to run really hard on a track, but after having driven around in it for a couple of weeks, I have already ordered a 2-piece rotor set as well as some yellow stuff pads from EBC that I plan to replace these with pretty soon, so you can stay tuned for a future video on that as well.
Also guys, a quick tip for the day which will help you really limit the amount of brake fluid loss that you have when you're changing out your calipers. If you depress your brake pedal by about an inch, I'm using an extension here and propping up against the seat. But if you're able to depress it by about an inch or so, you're going to close off a certain port within the master cylinder, and that helps prevent the fluid from actually leaking out. In fact, while I'm changing my lines, I have pretty much no fluid loss. So this really helps with having to handle the amount of brake fluid that you have. If you're not doing that and you are actually leaking fluid, you can work fast and you should be fine, but just make sure you keep an eye on your brake fluid level. You don't want all of this to drain out completely. Otherwise, you could get air into your master cylinder and could cause problems. But yeah, so that's just one quick tip for you guys. Would really help with this install because it does prevent you from losing a ton of fluid. But now we'll go ahead and do the rears. All right, so we're at the rear of the car now, and here's the caliper that we need to remove. There are just 2 bolts holding it on once again, like with the front. One here, and then there's going to be one further back. Before we undo those, I will go ahead and take out the banjo bolt here. That way we can just free this brake line out of the way and then just remove the caliper completely. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started on removing this guy. Alright, so now we have the brake rotor off, and just a reminder, when you're trying to take the rears off, do make sure that your parking brake isn't set. Otherwise, the boots will be kind of hitting the inside of the rotor. You're not going to be able to slide it off very easily. So just make sure your parking brake's disengaged when taking these off. And once again, we need to do the same thing we did with the front, which is we're going to have to snip this entire rim off of the dust shield. I'm going to try and leave as much of it intact as possible, but we do need to get that lip off so that way we can install the larger rotors. Alright, so I've gone and test fitted the rotor as well and checked the outside of that dust shield just to make sure that it's not rubbing on anything. So we are good to go there. Here is another look at the difference between the 2 calipers now. The base caliper, of course, looks a little bit smaller than the new one that we are putting on. So the new one is a little bit larger, also has that really nice painted face on the outside with the Nissan logo there on the front. One of the big advantages, though, between these 2 calipers is you do also get the 2-piston design here, so you actually have a piston on either side of the caliper that squeezes the brake rotor, as opposed to just having the single piston here on the outside and then having it push against the metal frame on the outside of the caliper. This allows you to have a little more braking response as you're kind of pushing it from both sides. It does allow you to apply a little bit more force on there as well, which helps increase the responsiveness. So this will really help with changing the braking feel of the car. Should get a little more brake response out of it. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and put the new caliper back onto the car. We will remount those 2 bolts that are sitting in the back. Those factory bolts should just go ahead and fit right into place with the new caliper, and then we'll go ahead and reattach the brake line and we'll be done with this side.
Another thing to keep in mind about the dust shields, the mounting bracket that's on the back of the caliper that actually attaches it to the car is slightly wider than the base brakes. and so it ends up rubbing up against the shield a little bit as you're trying to install it, which makes it kind of difficult. So you do also need to snip away some more of the dust shield where the caliper gets installed, just to make a little bit of extra room so it doesn't rub here.
Alright, and now we just have this last side to do here. We'll follow the exact same steps that we took on the driver's side, and we should be complete in 3, 2, and boom, the last rotor is now on and the caliper is installed. Now the worst thing you could do right now is slap your wheels on and try and take it out for a spin. You are going to have a ton of air inside your caliper as well as in your lines, and you need to get that air out. Otherwise, you're not going to have very responsive brake feel. So you need to give it a proper brake flush. I'm not going to show how to do that in this video. Instead, I'm just going to time lapse all of this. I have already made a very detailed video on getting your brakes flushed, so you can look for that in the top right corner, as well as a link in the description below. Now keep in mind that these sports calipers have 2 bleeder nipples on each caliper, not just one. You're going to have one on the outside and inside because you now have pistons on the inside and outside of the rotor. So you need to make sure you bleed both of them. I believe the order is outside first and inside second. If this isn't the case, I will leave a comment on the screen correcting myself, but you do need to make sure you bleed both of them. So to go ahead and do that for all 4 calipers, that way all of your brake lines are completely flush and you got good fluid, fresh fluid going through your entire brake system, and then you should be ready to go. So that is the installation process for the 370Z Akebono brakes. This will also work for G37s and G35s and 350s as well. I think they have a similar caliper setup. So far from driving around for a couple of weeks, I can definitely tell that there's a bit of change in the brake feel, especially at lower speeds. I barely have to tap the brake and I'm sort of thrown forward in my seat. The only thing is these stock rotors and pads that came with the caliper don't bite as well as I'd really like them to. So as I already stated, I do have some 2-piece rotors from Z1 coming in, as well as some EBC yellow stuff pads. This will help increase the braking feel a little bit more. It will also help really reduce the weight of the rotors because these are larger now, so they do weigh more than the stock ones that I already had. So that'll help as well. Stay tuned for that video. I'll get to show you guys how to install the pads in the Akebono calipers. So thank you guys for watching this video. I'll be doing a more in-depth review of the rotors and pads and the calipers and just the whole brake setup in general in a few weeks once I've had some time to sort of play with the new rotors and pads I have coming in. So look for that, and thank you guys for watching once again. I'll see you all in the next video. Later.